Sam asks, could you kindly elaborate on the distinction between doing a risk assessment for applications and conducting a risk assessment for ATO, authorization to operate on this esteemed platform? I can give you my experience on it real quickly. So I have been a part of a risk assessment for applications, like major applications, and versus a GSS or general support system. And so the differences are is a general support system will be like it's a bunch of computers, a bunch of servers, workstations, be all kinds of different things, and they'll have a boundary. That boundary, when we're doing an assessment to get an ATO, and let me back up a little bit. So an ATO is a formal documentation that is created from a process where we are evaluating the security posture, the security level of a system. And then at the end of it, once all the security assessment reports are done, once everybody's presented documentation, we've done all the scans and everything, the head of the agency, the CEO, or whoever will sign off on saying, yep, this is good. I'm going to take the remaining responsibility for this system. And so it's authorized to operate. And then the risk assessment for one application, you might have a new application that your organization developed, and you're going to run an assessment to determine if it has security flaws on it. So in my experience, doing the risk assessment for one software that we created, they ran a script on it. We looked through it, made sure it was documented properly. The processes for them to develop that application was appropriate. Everything was good. And then that was it. The ATO is a whole different ball game. That lasts months and months. It's a whole bunch of people working on the project. It's a ton of meetings. It is thousands of hours of man hours. It's night and day. It's two different things. It might include a physical security assessment, a wireless assessment. It might also include a software assessment. It's a whole bunch of things. And at the end, we get a document saying you can operate for 2-3 more years. And so that's been my experience, the difference between those two things. Night and day, two different things. Will, you want to speak to this one?
Yeah, but yeah, Bruce, excellent explanation, and especially on the ATO process. When you're doing a risk assessment outside of like an ATO, and we're talking like outside of the federal government, a risk assessment, if you do a risk assessment on a DoD system, and you determine that there's an unacceptable level of risk with this information system, either when it's trying to get an ATO or after an ATO when you're trying to recertify the ATO or get a reaccreditation. If that system has unacceptable risk, that authorizing official could pull that system off of the network.
Yes.
Full stop. You fix this before you even come back and talk about getting back on this network, right? Looking at private sector, you're not going to tell an organization, pull your internet connection right now because your risk assessment is trash, right? you do a risk assessment for an organization, and especially if it's the first one, you're going to have a bunch of unacceptable, and the unacceptable is based off of the organization. So let me use a different term. You're going to have a bunch of critical risks, critical vulnerabilities that you're going to find for an organization when you do a risk assessment in the private sector. But you're not going to tell that business to stop all operations and fix this and then call me when you got this done, and I will tell you when you can get this stuff back up. No, they're going to continue operating, and then you implement your plan of action while you're operating the system or while you're operating that network and all those corporate devices. So it's more of an ongoing, like risk assessments are informative for private side businesses.
Yeah, perfect.
And on the government side, federal side, it is restrictive, and like you're either at an acceptable level of risk and you're able to operate, or you're in an unacceptable level of risk and you're not able to operate. So that's one of the major distinctions I'll say with risk assessments.
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, I've got more questions. Let me see. I don't want to ignore you guys on TikTok. Let me see. I got a few questions. We'll talk on TikTok until they close it down.
Oh, real quick, Bruce, I wanted to highlight one of the products that you actually have. So if you guys have access to some of Bruce's materials, he has example templates of certain documentation. One of those is a security assessment report. So
Yeah.
if you look at that security assessment report, that thing is in depth. It is detailed. So when you do that as a part in a risk assessment in the DLG space, in the goal of obtaining an authority to operate is one step in the journey on the risk management framework that you're going, like it's different stages. And that's stage 4 when you do the security controls assessment. And
Yeah.
so once you do, that's just one part of the journey. You can do that whole risk assessment and then still not get an approval to operate based off of your findings. And so like that report is very detailed. I can do a risk assessment for a private organization on a PowerPoint presentation that's maybe 3 pages, right? Like I can do that. And then an Excel spreadsheet that is 3 sheets, right? And it's not that in depth. I use this cybersecurity framework. It has 100 something controls. I go through each one of those controls and then we're good to go. You do NIST 853, do a security assessment on that. And depending on the level of security that's required, is it a moderate system? Is it a high
Yeah.
system?
Hello.
You could have thousands of controls that you
Yeah.
have to go through, which is why he mentioned I can do a risk assessment or a quick risk assessment on a private organization in a day. I can do that, especially if they're a small business, they're only doing cloud, they don't have a bunch of infrastructure. Like I can do that in a day. Interview a couple of people from the IT department, somebody from HR, bam, we're good. But when you're doing a security assessment as a part of the NIST 853, like NIST, I'm sorry, NIST 830, that is a months long process where
Yeah.
you're looking at, especially if they're starting out, that's like a 6 to 9 month, if not 12-month process,
Yes.
depending on how advanced and how intricate and how many integrations there are with that system. So that security assessment report that Bruce has as a document, that'll just give you a glimpse at all the things that you're looking at on the ATO side versus
Yes.
something I can do on the private side.